Today's lesson, as part of our unit on job preparation skills, is all about job interviews. What's a job interview? Well, if you think about the hiring process, you typically have to submit an application. And usually, when you submit your application, not only are you going to include your personal information, you're going to include your resume. So the next step is now, this is if you advance to the next step, because sometimes when we apply for a job, we won't always get an interview. But the next stage of the hiring process is a job interview. So that means the employer is interested in having you as a potential employee. So what a job interview is, it's basically a series of questions that a potential employer will ask you. And it's really just in order to get to know you and see if you are a good fit for the job. Do you possess the necessary qualifications and skill sets? They know that you have the experience based on your application and your resume, but they're trying to see your personality. Are you a good fit? Do you work well under pressure? Things like that. So job interviews these days may be over the phone, via computer. So you might do a virtual face-to-face interview over Zoom, or in person. It looks like in this picture, they are doing an in-person interview. So the woman is sitting before a panel of employers, and she's going to answer some questions that they have. So how do you prepare for a job interview? Well, once you have your interview scheduled and the employer will reach out to you to do this, there's a few things that you can do to be prepared for the day of your interview. The first thing you want to do is review your resume so that you are well-versed in your experiences. You need to know your resume front and back. Your employer will have a copy of your resume with them, and so they don't really need you to bring your own copy. They want to see, do you match in real life what you wrote on paper? Also, practicing mock interviews with a family member, a teacher, a friend is a great way to familiarize yourself with the process. So there's a lot of aspects that go into a job interview that I won't really touch base on today because we're going to talk about in class. But there's nonverbal aspects, so your body language. How did you greet the person? Did you make eye contact? Did you shake their hand or say hello? Did you introduce yourself? There's a lot of things that go into a job interview, whether it's in person or held over the phone or virtually, that can only really be that can be mastered if you practice. Okay, so I highly recommend practicing mock interviews with a family member, just so you know. Okay, so first I greet the person, next I have a seat. They'll ask me questions, I answer them. At the conclusion of the interview, I can ask my own questions. That's roughly how they go. Interviews can run anywhere from a few minutes to maybe even half an hour or longer if they are asking you questions. Generally speaking, the longer the interview goes, the better it is, because that means that they're really interested in you and just want to learn more information about you. And lastly, you really want to look up directions to the location so that you know how to get there. This is a common mistake, is that people will wait until the day of to look up where the location is. And let's say they get stuck in traffic or they get lost because the directions they printed out were inaccurate. Look up the directions. I would even say practice going to the location. So if you're taking a bus, practice taking a bus to your job interview. If someone is dropping you off, practice or have them take you to the location just to confirm that it is the right place so that you aren't stressed out or flustered on the day of your job interview. You really want to be in a good mindset, okay? So how should you dress for a job interview? This is a big one. When dressing for a job interview, it is best to wear business professional clothing. And I'll show you on the next slide what exactly that looks like. But overall, make sure your hair and skin are clean and well-kempt. Wear a conservative amount of deodorant and cologne or perfume because you don't want to overwhelm anyone. You don't want their first impression of you to be, oh my goodness, this person is wearing a very heavy perfume or very heavy amounts of deodorant. Now, I understand that not all of us have business professional clothing, and that is totally fine. If you don't have that, Try to wear business casual clothes. You can even probably borrow this from a relative, let's say a brother, a sister, mom or dad, aunt or uncle, just to make sure that you look professional for your job interview. You look ready. You look like you take this job seriously and you want it. So here's a look at what business professional for a woman and business professional for a man look like. So you're typically going to wear like a blazer. You'll wear a button-up shirt. You might wear slacks and a skirt that is appropriate length. So past the knees is usually good. You'll want to wear closed-toed shoes, no matter what, really, whether it's business professional or business casual. And you, if you're a gentleman, you'd want to wear a tie and some dress shoes. Now, business casual is more what you would see in an everyday office setting. And so even if you're applying to be a cashier at a fast food restaurant, or if you're applying to work at Amazon, you still want to show up and be professional looking. You want to take the job seriously. So business casual would be a nice dressy blouse, one that doesn't show too much cleavage, no bulky jewelry. You might get caught on something if they ask you to do a simulation-based question. You can wear dress pants and some, again, nice polished closed-toed shoes. For gentlemen, you'll still wear a button-up shirt and a tie, and you'll wear a belt and dress pants. So not too different from business professional, but likely a little more accessible in terms of what you guys have at your house. All right, here's the biggest part. This is the core of the interview. What questions will they ask me in an interview? So they're going to ask you a lot of questions. They're going to start off with basic questions that can be found in your resume. And then as the interview goes on, they'll ask you deeper level questions. It's really important, though, to remember that an interview is really an attempt to get to know you and see what makes you a good fit for the job. The interviewer will likely ask you some personal questions. What are your ambitions? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? What makes you a good candidate for this job? How do you handle stress and pressure? But it's always going to be in scope of what your interests and experiences bring to the table, or what makes you an asset to the company. Why should they hire you? It's so important when answering these questions to be honest and confident in your responses. Don't lie. Don't lie and say that you can do things that you can't, because if you do get the job, they're going to expect that you are able to fulfill those commitments, and it can just lead to a lot of stress. So if you are faced with a question that asks you about a skill that you do not have, you can express to your employer that you are someone who is quick to learn, that you are someone who takes feedback well and works with it, someone who will commit to working and developing the skill sets that the company needs, and just really be open-minded, okay? And it's also okay to ask questions at the end of the interview. So to the left are questions that your employer will likely ask you. So tell me about yourself. Why are you suitable for this job? What is your biggest weakness? Tell me about a time when you had to work with a difficult person. That's something that they will almost always ask. And then to the right are questions that you can ask once the interviewer is done. So you can ask them, how would you describe the company, your culture? What are the challenges of this job? When do you expect to make a selection, or what are the next steps? You can ask them about career development questions. So what training is available to explore new skills? What is the typical career path for this position? How are new employees onboarded or trained here? That's a really important question. It's okay to ask that because, again, you want to know, what's the process? What can I expect as a potential employee? It is not okay to ask about salary. So salary is how much you make. Your employer might ask you what your salary expectations are, but in order to be polite and professional, we don't, as potential employees, ask the employer about salary questions. Okay, remember the interview is to get to know you. All right. Hopefully you've done your due diligence in looking up the place that you're going to be working at, so you know these questions already. So let's look at some scenarios. All right. Before an interview, what is one way to help make sure you make it to the interview on time? Do you follow up with the hiring manager, shower in the morning, practice interview questions, or get directions? Well, the question asks me, how do I know I'll make it on time to the interview? So in this case, I mean, these are all things I would suggest doing just in general for interviews. But this question, you want to get directions. You want to know where you're going ahead of time. What can your body language help show during an interview? So body language is nonverbal communication. It's how we use our bodies to send messages to others, whether we are conscious or unconscious of it. And so your body language, if you are sitting straight up, your shoulders are back, you have a smile, not too excessive, but a polite smile. You are making eye contact, but not too much eye contact. That can help demonstrate or convey confidence, that you are a confident person. You know what your skill level is, and you are able to act on it. You should arrive at least 5 minutes early to an interview. Now, I didn't discuss this one, but I would say true. Yes, arrive at least 5 minutes early. Why? Because you don't know what the parking situation is. You want to make sure that you are in the appropriate area of the building, things like that. And finally, after the interview is over, thank the interviewer with a firm hug, high five, punch, or handshake. I hope you said handshake because that is the correct answer. All right. In this day and age, due to COVID restrictions, instead of a handshake, you can slightly bow your head and just say, thank you so much for having me. I look forward to hearing back from you. You don't have to do a handshake or a high five if you or the interviewer is uncomfortable. Again, that's because we want to prevent the spread of germs and illness. So that's always polite. And yeah, handshakes are cool once there's a vaccine, but until then, we can just bow our heads a little bit and just let the employer know that you are thankful for the opportunity to interview.